Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, right, today, the disinformation, misinformation campaigns by states that, are well-funded. In fact, Microsoft's been doing a lot of work on disinformation, right? And we kind of understand, for example, in particular, the Russian operation around it. There's $1 billion spent and translated into 20-odd languages, and targeting is involved in it, and distribution. And so therefore, the question I think you're asking is, hey, does AI further accelerate and give tools? Absolutely. I think that techniques, even like the cyber attacks are more prolific, and what have we done? We've sort of said, okay, let's get our defenses. So I would go back, distribution, like a lot of where does it get distributed? Guess what? It's distributed in news feeds and social media and other places, on the web. There's a lot we can do in search and in things like chat to make sure the distribution is one level. Targeting, they're all spending money, by the way, guess what? Using advertising dollars on what? Social media, search, and other places, and YouTube, and what have you. So let's have a conversation about which business model is funding, in fact, the dissemination of all of this. Right. And so I think there's lots of things in our control, as opposed to saying this is the one tool, because after all, the problem exists today. And here's the fundamental thing I think about, that lump of labor fallacy, as the economists call it, right? At least it's been disproven up to now, right? Every time there's been new technology, there's been real displacement, and it's a real challenge. I at least fall into that camp, right? So let's think about this, that there will be new jobs. Who would have thought that there will be a prompt engineer, right? But it is a job, right? As we speak, one of the things that's most exciting to me is we have 100 million software developers in GitHub today. With this coding assistance now that we have with Copilot, I think there can be 1 billion developers. In fact, the world needs 1 billion developers, because if you look at the number of every company is a software company, they need more software developers. So the idea that this is actually a democratizing tool to make access to new technology and access to new knowledge easier, so that the ramp up on the learning curve is easier, that's one. Second thing is frontline workers. One of the most exciting thing for me is somebody who is in the front line in a factory, in retail, in healthcare, can literally sketch up an app they want and take a photograph and have it build it, right? So think about that. Like, you are now an IT person, as long as you have some domain expertise. And the thing that was most mind-boggling for wanting to get some subsidy from the government. And in India, there's an unbelievable revolution happening around digital public goods. And so they have the speech-to-text, text-to-speech public good. So one developer in India sort of basically works at Microsoft Research, working with the government agency there, put together this solution which daisy-chained GPT with all of the trained model or text of the Indian government. So this farmer was able to express a complex thought, where he said, I just want the subsidy I heard about this program on television. And it comes back and says, fill out these portals, go to this portal, fill out these forms. And he says, look, I don't know what a portal is. I don't want to fill out a form. Can you do it for me? And so he used even the transformer models, action transformers to do it. I mean, that was just unbelievable. The thing that is unbelievable is not just the technology, but the fact that something that got built a couple of months earlier in the west coast of the United States had diffused so fast. A rural Indian farmer, that's kind of unbelievable. Well, it's kind of like, do I know how to multiply, right? I mean, when was the last time I did mental math on multiplications, right? So here, a couple of the comments. One is, one of the dreams of this, which I know, people like Reid Hoffman and Bill and others have also talked deeply about, is what if all the children of the world have an AI tutor? What if an AI tutor could engage a student and really help them get the concepts? Because if you think about it, right, education today is sort of intimidating, right? You can sort of say, hey, look, here are the Feynman lectures, go read them, and you love physics. I mean, I don't know who reads them. I mean, like, I never read them in school. Like, if only, I think about it, like, if I had this AI tutor, I would have been a better student. I would have been more engaged. I would have been more curious, because the fear of learning goes away. So that's the first thing. And the other point to your thing is, we will learn new skills. I'll tell you what, like, this Copilot pattern has made me a better editor, right? We sort of put a lot of emphasis on creation, not as much in fact-finding and editing. Maybe that's at a premium. So therefore, I think we will adjust to work with these tools. Critical thinking will still be very much what humans do, but I think that there is an opportunity for us to retool ourselves with new tools. Steve Jobs had this beautiful, beautiful line, right, which is, Computers are like the bicycles for the mind. We now have an upgrade. We have a steam engine for the mind. And so what I would say is kids should do all the things that now allow us to do with this augmented tool. And things like critical reasoning, being able to be more creative with the machine, to be able to sort of not be afraid of learning new things. That's one of the other fascinating things. I'm not afraid. Like biology is one place where because I can't read one of those nature papers and understand, summarize, it'll teach me. See, the beauty of the chat interface or on the web Copilot for Bing is the PDF is right on my left, and I can keep asking it. It's kind of like asking a personal tutor. Like my daughter described this to me, which she said it's kind of like having a friend and a tutor always with you while you're reading. Yeah, in fact, I've known Sam for a while now. In fact, the first time I met Sam was when he was running his startup, and I was running Bing in 2007, 8. And they actually, OpenAI, I forget now the exact year, maybe 2016 even, or 2015, whenever they started on Azure. And then I reconnected back, that's probably right, 2019 or seems, before that. There are a couple of things, OpenAI, as I said, it's got a very mission-driven company, right? I mean, it's a company that is formed with the foundational idea that, look, this is technology that they're going to pursue and build and make sure the nonprofit at the end of the day is in control of this technology so that it can benefit the world. And they're very, very, driven by it. Anybody who joins their mission joins for that mission. And so it was very important for Sam and his team that they found a partner who understood that, right? And so that's why we were comfortable with it. In fact, to me, one of my dreams is the only reason why I want to work in information technology, I want to work at Microsoft, is to really be part of that democratizing force this time around so that the technology goes. It will be good for companies. We don't have to wait for regulation, for all to have either standards or adopt the NIST standard and use that as, I'll call it, the start of any self-regulation. Then on top of that, if you talk about regulation, maybe we can unpack it from the application domain, right? Because after all, context in which something is being applied, right? Or it's being applied in education, it's being applied in healthcare, or it's being applied in retail. So I think we can have the regulatory frameworks that already exist in all these, whether it's consumer safety or financial regulations or what have you. My approach, at least, would be regulators know what they're doing. They've, and in some sense, that's the fact that we are having this dialogue, right? We were a couple of us were at the White House a few weeks ago and having a dialogue. OSTP, Arti Prabhakar and Gina Raimondo and the Vice President and all convened folks to have a dialogue. And I'm sure they're having dialogue with many other teams as well. That's great. And so to me, I don't think it's just a question of some technology knowledge. It's just a question of, hey, how do we make sure that this stuff gets deployed so that really the benefits of this are protected? It's a much more dynamic world. I mean, OpenAI is a startup, a couple of hundred people, Inflection, small startup, Character.ai, Cohere.
Could a small player win today in this space?
Could. I mean, it all depends on what happens, right? Which is what's the product market fit that one of these folks finds, right? It's not a given that, whether it's Alphabet or Microsoft are the only two games in town. I'm glad. I mean, think about this. Who would have thought last year if you were sitting here and somebody had said to you, oh, you know what? There will be real contest around search. And people may actually have even a dream that there's an alternative to Google. There is not just Bing. There is ChatGPT and Bing, and there is lots of other folks who have entered the search market. I mean, that to me is sort of be celebrated. First of all, there is a legal side to it. What is copyright? And then how we really have a framework of law on protecting what is copyrighted. And then there is what is derivative work, what is original work, and all of this. Let's sort of set aside. I'm not a lawyer. Let's set aside what the legal framework is. But I would say all of us build new knowledge on old knowledge. And if you sort of go with that premise, this just accelerates that. Like if there is no incentive structure which allows for the people who produce original content to get compensated, then that'll be a problem. So the way at least I look at our business model fundamentally, that's why citations will be important. I think about the contract. I think the question is, do publishers allow AI to They will only allow it if they see economic return. And we as providers of, let's say, chat with search have to be grounded in that. And we have already announced that, hey, we will have ad units that we will share, economics around. First of all, I think anyone who says, look, anything that is just doing aggregations, I would just say, Barry, should start, let's start all the way with all of the places, like starting at search, right? And if the bar is, I like the bar of hey, this should be as good for publishers, if not better, as current aggregation points of news aggregation, search aggregation, social media aggregation. They're all lots of places where this happens today. And if this thing somehow is not actually helping more publishers, then let's talk about it.